Hey everybody, how's it going? My name is Dave Landsberger, and I am the author of Tell Me What You See Vanishing, and I'll Tell You Who You Are, a walk through the garden at the Merwin Conservancy. This was supposed to come out at the fair this weekend, and we just thought it would be great to do a virtual reading for all y'all of the zine itself. The illustrations were created by Ben Marcus, who's a wonderfully talented artist from Chicago. I'm also from Chicago. We're going to talk later at the end of the reading about how this was created, and I'm just going to kind of tell the story of the conception and the whole, how it all kind of came together. This is published by Zine. Before we get going, I just wanted to say thanks to Steve and Lillian for believing in the project and making it a reality. As you can see just from the cover, it turned out to be quite beautiful. And the insides are just as beautiful, and I'm going to be sharing these illustrations with you, doing a little bit of story time, as I go through and read it for everybody. If you don't know who Merwin is, WS Merwin, right? WS Merwin in the last 100 years is one of the most famous American poets. Passed away last year, which is something that we address in the zine. But he was a prolific writer, he was a prolific translator as well, and had a major affinity for nature. And his palm garden in Maui, Hawaii, in the aptly named town of Haiku, believe it or not, is really something that that is really kind of staggering to see and witness. And that's really what this is all about. When I went there for a tour, and this is me just relaying the story to everyone who can't quite make it. So if you want to purchase this, head to Dale Zine's website. I think it's $10. It's totally worth it because it turned out beautiful. And I just love Ben's work. I mean, I think that's a really good price to get 6 of his illustrations. But on top of that, if you're going to buy it, you could just skip to the end where we're going to talk a little bit more about the stories and how it was created. But for those of you that really want to hear it, here we go. Tell me what you see vanishing, and I'll tell you who you are. So first, I'm going to read you a foreword. This piece requires some framing around the date of its creation. Paula Merwin passed away on March 8th, 2017. I visited the Merwin Conservancy in September of 2017. And this piece was written over the winter of 2017-2018. W.S. Merwin passed away on March 15th, 2019, after this was written. It is important to engage with the living that takes place after one spouse has passed, leaving the other widowed. Out of respect for Paula Merwin, her life, and her mission to the Merwin Conservancy, I decided to not edit this piece upon her husband's passing. I hope you will find the preservation of this moment in time respectful. He's good. He's really good. Maui, Hawaii. Paula refused to move in with William until he installed a telephone. William installed a telephone. The telephone line twists through the brush of palms, copper pears entwined and buttressed between the fronds. Palms, palms, palms. Over 400 species and over 2,740 individual trees. William, known to the world at large as W.S. Merwin, purchased his property in Haiku, Maui, over 40 years ago for a few reasons. The main intent, still clear when traveling to the residence today, is that the property was removed from society and difficult to get to, let alone find without guidance. A single dirt lane road carves around the north-central agricultural valleys of Maui and straddles the 18-acre property, densely fenced in by pickets of flora. William also bought the land that makes up the Merwin Conservancy for more instinctual reasons. He wanted to save something. Decades later, after beginning his mission, the Merwins and a team of gardeners have accomplished something truly incredible. They've not only saved the land from exhaustion and decay, but they've saved the livelihood and futures of native and invasive palms from all over the world. I step out of my Jeep and shake hands with Sarah Tequila, Director of Programs for the Merwin Conservancy. The Merwin Conservancy, founded by William and Paula Merwin, seeks to preserve the Merwin's property as a retreat for writers, as a preserving testament to the power of nature so that future generations may know its enveloping wonder. I am a part of a monthly tour group that will explore the property for the morning. In the parking lot, a few miles from the Conservancy, Sarah reads Merwin's poem, Homecoming, an ode to the golden plover, also known as the kolea in native Hawaiian. The kolea breeds in the Arctic and winters in Hawaii, migrating the entire 4,800-kilometer journey in a non-stop 3 to 4 day flight. As Sarah reads the poems, a kolea needles the morning grass beyond the pavement, signaling the coming of winter in the Hawaiian Islands. We consolidate cars and come home to the Conservancy for the first time. When William bought the property from the state of Hawaii years ago, it was officially declared an agricultural wasteland. Years of over-farming and uninformed irrigation practices had depleted the land of its nutrients and made the soil barren. It's a story heard often in Hawaii. Corporate farming for sugarcane or pineapple without care or concern to the reallocation of water, nutrients, or the unique species that rely upon the fragile land to flourish. In this particular case, the previous owners of the land did not practice proper terrace farming, permitting the rich soil to wash away after every cultivation season until it had all wiggled down and off the property. This brazen disregard for ancient agricultural practices could only be deliberate. Sarah passes around a photograph of the property from the time when William purchased it. The Conservancy is unrecognizable and unbelievable. As Merwin describes it himself, it was like planting into a dirt road. Merwin focused those first few growing seasons on restoring and rejuvenating the soil by reintroducing keystone species to enhance the strength of the soil itself. When looking up at the canopy that folds over the sunlight in the Merwin Conservancy today, it's nearly impossible to fathom the commitment and patience that Merwin must have possessed those first few years, laying claim to the vibrancy of the garden today. With the assistance of bamboo walking sticks and copious amounts of organic mosquito repellent, we make our way past a curious BMW hatchback. A guest's car, I was told, not Merwin's. I was also told he was more inclined to drive a pickup truck. We make our way down into the valley. Also on the tour with us is Olin Erickson, head gardener at the Merwin Conservancy. Olin was hired by William over a decade ago to deal with a weed on the property. A weed is just a plant out of place, he explains. William kept giving him jobs. As the Merwins advanced in age, more of the cultivation and maintenance responsibilities fell to Olin and his staff. We pause under a palm tree about 25 feet in height. Its name is Hyophorbe indica, colloquially known as the poison palm or the champagne palm. Hyophorbe indica is native to the island of Reunion, a small nation due east of Madagascar that holds the distinction of being the only nation in the Indian Ocean to belong to the European Union. It is an official department of France. As I look up into the tree, my eyes are drawn to the clusters of the palm's fruit, orange-colored and textured like a cross between a date and a raspberry. Olin tells the group about how this palm was thought to be extinct until William found out. Merwin alerted his community of palm enthusiast friends to the fact that he had 6 of the palms on the Conservancy's property. William distributed the seeds to arborists across the world, assisting in Hyophorbe indica's bounce back from the netherworld. Olin and Sarah pass out the palm seeds to the group and teach us how to remove the exocarp and root the seeds properly. I stand under the Hyophorbe indica for a moment after the group moves onward. snagged by the orange fruit's heart, illuminated through the sun behind it. The thought crosses my mind that saving this species may have brought Merwin more joy than any of the finished poems he's ever written. I hustle up and catch up with the group. Sarah is reading Merwin's poem, The Palms. Many of the fruits are no longer larger than peas, but some are like the brains of black marble, and some have more than one seed in them. Some are full of milk of one taste or another, and on a number of them there is a writing from long before speech. The Conservancy's commitment to sharing worldwide species of palms with their visitors on the most genetically isolated island chain in the world creates a sense of danger on the property that only transition can provide. In Hawaii, an invasive species makes its way to the islands every 8 days. Rapid ohia death, a fungus that kills ohia trees in a matter of days, has been detected on the Big Island in multiple outbreaks since 2014. This invasive species threatens at least 80% of all forests in Hawaii. The coconut beetle was detected on Oahu as recently as 2017 and threatens bananas, taro, coconuts, and all palm species, including the 19 endemic Prochardia species already classified as rare, endangered, or vulnerable. Olin smells of fire. The tour pauses for a moment as he tests the air. We learn that a neighbor has a history of burning their biopiles, which is illegal in the state of Hawaii. They are from California, Olin says. After a minute of casual chatter, we move on to continue the tour and see if the smell of smoke is persisting. We've climbed up the gulch, moving away from the microclimate of cooler and danker air, and are on the other side of the Merwin's home on the property. This is the home that William lives in today, widowed by his wife Paula, who passed away on March 8th, 2017. In the last few years, as William's sight has faded, Paula acted as his eyes, reading to him and assisting in the transcription of his poetry. The reverence that the Conservancy staff holds for their co-founder is clear in their tonality when they speak his name and when they speak her name. As we move deeper into the garden, Sarah and Olin share William's rules with the group. They are rules for meditation, for life, for writing, for gardening. Pay attention. Seek balance and harmony. Put care and love in all that you do. Repeat. We make our way back to our cars. As I shake his hand and thank him, I tell Olin that I'm a poet. I'll tell you what Ezra Pound told William, he says. 75 lines a day. Write 75 lines, good or bad, each day. To take a dirt road and make it a garden is to write a poem. To come home over and over and make it your home each time is to read a poem. We reverse off of the property and head back to the dirt road from where we came. I look as far out as my eyes will take me, inadequate for my vision's thirst. I consider WS Merwin's poems, his remarkable body of work, and the stamina it has taken to produce it all. But what truly sticks with me is that this land, the Merwin Conservancy itself, is truly W.S. Merwin's life's work. A tangible advocacy for the power of nature and the brilliant armament of the earth's inert tools. From Merwin's poem Place, On the last day of the world, I would want to plant a tree. Thanks for joining me for this reading here. If you want to stick around, I'll tell you a little bit more about how it was created. Obviously, I went to Hawaii. I went with my wife on our honeymoon, and we visited the garden. I actually reached out months in advance to Sarah, who I mentioned in the piece, basically begging to get a tour. And she actually rescheduled the tour date around my trip, which was super flattering, and I'll always thank her for that. I went there, I took a bunch of notes, I got bit by a million mosquitoes. It was great. And then when I came home, I wrote this piece. I shared it with Scott Cunningham, who runs Oh Miami and Highlight Books. They published my book, which I'll show you in a second. And he said, we need to make this happen. Let's send it to Zine. And that's exactly what we did. And I always wanted to work with Ben Marcus, right? When I knew that this was going to become visual, I had a really specific short list of people that I wanted to consider, and Ben's name was number one. Ben Marcus I had met a couple years back at a comics show called Chicago Alternative Comics Expo. It's otherwise known as Cake. And I had bought this piece that I'm going to show you right here from Ben. This hangs up in my studio that we're in right now. I just love it. I love the colors. I love the risograph. On the opposite side of this, there's actually a comic, a 4-panel comic. Super cool. But yeah, I just love the energy of Ben's work, and you could tell he had a lot of influences from manga and anime, particularly from like the mid to late 80s and early 90s, which I also had a lot of affinity for. So I reached out to Ben, and it was funny because Steve at Dale also was a huge fan of Ben. We didn't even know that we were just, big geeks about it. And he was like, yeah, do it. That would be so cool. So I reached out to Ben. He was totally interested. So we met up and we got some pancakes and we just kind of talked about the project. And I shared a bunch of pictures with him that I had taken that were Polaroids. And we just kind of, ate breakfast and talked about everything. And a couple things that we decided pretty early on was obviously we wanted to have, flora, plants be a big part of the visual representation of the zine. But we also wanted to have something human, right? To reflect Merwin as a person, his wife, Paula, and the human connection that really exists through all of his poems, right? And I just think, Ben did such an amazing job, right? Like just coming up with objects, things that are alive, like this butterfly, for instance, and I haven't even shown you the back cover yet. I mean, this is actually one of my favorite ones. There actually is a print of this that exists somewhere, this front cover, without the words on it. If you're interested, reach out to Ben on Instagram. He could probably hook you up. But anyways, we talked about a simplified color palette. We talked about risograph printing, just because we were huge fans. And there was also one other specific influence. I actually brought this book to show Ben while we were meeting. Aizen Suzuki, a very, very cool Japanese pop artist. This book represents his work from 1984 to 1993. Aizen Suzuki is very famous abroad, starting to become more popular here. And Ben and I bonded over him because we both had a huge affinity for a genre of music called city pop. And city pop music is sort of the best way to describe it is it's adult contemporary urban music from the late 80s and early 90s in Japan. And the reason that's relevant here is because Tatsuro Yamashita, who was kind of the father of city pop, some of his most famous albums, including For You, which is his most famous album, the cover was illustrated by Aizen Suzuki. Now, I'm going to show you a couple illustrations in here to give you just sort of an idea about like why we were so drawn to the work here. But tropical scenes are a big part of Aizen Suzuki's aesthetic. So this green one right here is actually called Waikiki Beach. Waikiki's obviously in Oahu, not in Maui, but there's all these tropical scenes. I love how there's just like sort of like confetti just kind of like flying through the air and everything that he does, and just dripping with color. I just love it. A fun fact about Aizen Suzuki is that he's actually one of the inspirations for the color palette of Sonic the Hedgehog, the original video game, which is just like so many nostalgia vibes, like all coming together at once. But I shared that book with Ben. He was like, wow, it was super cool. Thank you for sharing it with me. And it kind of helped funnel us a little bit. And there's just so much synergy going on, like between City Pop, Aizen Suzuki, Ben Marcus, and then to bring in this beautiful timeless palm garden, I thought was sort of left field, but it just kind of fit like at the end of the day. And I was really proud of the work that Ben did. I can't say enough amazing things about it. If you're interested in picking up more work by Ben, I've got one other thing I want to show you here, which is a zine called Crisis Zone. You can definitely get kind of like a Blade Runner sort of vibe while reading this. Once again, another simplified color palette that I love. You know, definitely has some cyberpunk, you know, elements to it. Really, really cool zine. You got to check it out if you like Ben's work. And then the last thing I want to show you is just my book. In case you're interested in learning more about my poetry, this is Suicide by Jaguar. It's published by Highlight Books. And a really cool thing about the book is that it's also in Spanish, translated by J.V. Portela, Suicidio por Jaguar, right? So you can check that out on Highlight Books' website. Thanks. You know, thanks for spending some time with me, you know, in your quarantined life. It's quite a strange time to be alive. And to be a human being that has access to tons of information and has to stay inside and not interact with people. And, you know, Merwin passed away last year, and I didn't know him well enough to guess what he would think about what's going on in the world today. But I know that he valued life over everything, and he understood the fragility of it at the end of the day and how transient everything is on this planet. And I think that's why he wanted to save all those different palms and bring them all together and do it tastefully. He believed in the competitive elements of nature. Like in his garden, he wanted things to fight one another and survive. And I think that that's an important part of his worldview and how he looked at poetry. Creating his own work and sharing it with people. It's a strange time to be alive, man. I miss Merwin, and I wish I could read poems about this moment from him. But with that being said, Merwin has an extensive library of work. If you are looking to explore the work of W.S. Merwin, I would strongly recommend that you read first the book The Lice, which is decades old, but phenomenal. He won the Pulitzer for a book called The Carrier of Ladders. That came out immediately after The Lice, and it's one of those things where like they give you the prize for the work one too late, you know? Like they realize, oh man, we should have given it to him for The Lice. Give it to him for The Carrier of Ladders. I mean, it's a great book too, don't get me wrong. But you really can't go wrong with Merwin. And I'm gonna end things here. Thank you for spending some time with me.